Today, we are diving into one of the most important, one of the most decisive, and honestly, one of the most dramatic battles in all of Japanese history. This is a conflict that, in a single day, ended a century of civil war and literally set Japan's course for the next 250 years. This is the story of Sekigahara.
You know, this quote from Sun Tzu's The Art of War just perfectly captures the razor's edge this whole story is balanced on. For the tens of thousands of samurai gathering in a misty valley back in the year 1600, the stakes were absolute. Survival, power, the entire future of Japan, it was all going to be decided in just a few hours. So to really understand why this one battle was so monumental, we've got to look at the world it happened in. Japan was a nation on edge. Seriously. This wasn't some random clash. It was the explosive climax to a century of pure chaos.
For over 100 years, Japan had been completely torn apart. It was a period known as the Sengoku Jidai, the Age of Warring States. I mean, just imagine it. The central government had totally collapsed. The country was this fractured chessboard of ambitious warlords, or daimyo, all of them fighting for supremacy through war, tricky alliances, and of course, betrayal. And this timeline really shows just how fragile any kind of unity was. You had two brilliant leaders who had clawed Japan back from the brink. First, Oda Nobunaga, ruthlessly effective until his own general turned on him and killed him. Then came his successor, Toyotomi Hideyoshi. This guy rose from humble beginnings to become the undisputed ruler, finally pulling the nation together. But, and this is the huge but, in 1598, Hideyoshi dies. And who does he leave as his heir? His 5-year-old son. A child, meant to rule a nation of hungry warlords. And this is where that brand new peace just begins to shatter. Hideyoshi knew his death would create a power vacuum, so he set up a council of 5 regions, the most powerful men in Japan, to rule until his son was old enough. He made them swear these solemn oaths to protect the boy and the Toyotomi clan. But you know, with the top guy gone, those oaths, well, they weren't worth the paper they were written on. Old rivalries and new ambitions started bubbling to the surface almost immediately. And from those cracks, 2 factions emerged, centered around 2 men who could not have been more different. Their personal beef would escalate into a national war, forcing every single warlord in Japan to pick a side. So on one side, you've got Tokugawa Ieyasu. He was the most powerful guy on the council, a patient, cunning veteran of countless battles. He commanded respect and controlled huge territories in eastern Japan. And on the other side, Ishida Mitsunari. He was a brilliant administrator who saw Ieyasu's ambition for what it was, a huge threat. But here's the thing. Mitsunari was a politician, not a warrior. He just didn't have that battlefield cred that the proud samurai class respected, and that was a weakness Ieyasu was absolutely going to exploit.
Ieyasu's group became known as the Eastern Army. His goal was pretty clear, even if he didn't say it out loud. Push aside the kid heir and set up his own dynasty as the new undisputed rulers. And he gathered an absolutely immense force of loyal Eastern daimyo to make it happen.
Mitsunari, in turn, rallied the Western Army. Now, their stated cause was super noble: defend the legacy of the great Hideyoshi and protect his son. And he put together a force that, on paper, was even bigger than Ieyasu's. But as we're about to see, their loyalty was kind of a patchwork quilt of alliances, and some of those patches are not sewn on very tight.
So how did these 2 massive armies end up in the same little valley? Well, the conflict didn't just explode overnight. It was this rapid, high-stakes chess match of strategic moves and provocations that drew them straight to their date with destiny.
Okay, so the spark came when a powerful region up in the north, Usugi Kagekatsu, openly defied Ieyasu. Ieyasu saw this as a direct challenge, so he had to respond. He marches the bulk of his eastern army north to punish the guy. And this was the exact moment Mitsunari was waiting for. With Ieyasu gone, he swoops in, seizes key strongholds like Osaka Castle, where the young heir was, and issues a formal declaration of war, branding Ieyasu a traitor. But then, the Western Army makes its first huge mistake. On their march, they get held up for 10 long days trying to take Fushimi Castle, which was defended by this small but fanatically loyal Tokugawa garrison. This heroic stand bought Ieyasu exactly what he needed most: time. He immediately abandons the northern campaign and force marches his army back west to take on Mitsunari head-to-head. And this brings us to the valley of Sekigahara. Mitsunari chose this spot on purpose. He believed the terrain would give him an unbeatable tactical advantage. As these 2 armies converged,
The stage was set for a battle that would be decided not just by swords and spears, but by promises and by betrayal.
And this table just brilliantly illustrates Mitsunari's strategy. I mean, he thought he had this in the bag. He's got the high ground, his main forces are in a solid defensive position, the powerful Mori clan is sitting in the back ready to sweep in, and most importantly, 15,000 troops under a key ally, Tokugawa Hideyoshi, are perched on Mount Matsuo, perfectly positioned to just smash into the Eastern Army's flank. Ieyasu was literally marching his army into what looked like a perfect trap.
So at dawn on October 21st, 1600, a thick fog covered everything. When it finally lifted around 8 a.m., the battle just exploded. The Eastern Army charged with this ferocious intensity, but the Western Army, using that amazing terrain, held them off. For hours, the battle was just a bloody, brutal stalemate, a real meat grinder, with neither side getting a clear advantage.
Sensing the moment was right, Mitsunari lit the signal fire. This was it, the linchpin of his entire plan. He's signaling Tokugawa Hideyoshi to charge down from that mountain and crush the exposed side of Ieyasu's army. If he attacks, the battle is almost certainly over. So, the big question is, what happens next?
Nothing, absolutely nothing, just silence. For what must have felt like an eternity on that battlefield below, Tokugawa Hideyoshi did not move. See, it turns out this young lord had a personal grudge against Mitsunari, and Tokugawa Ieyasu, the master strategist, had been secretly talking to him, promising him all sorts of rewards if he'd just betray his side. So Hideyoshi is just sitting up there, torn, and his indecision is holding the fate of an entire nation in the balance.
And this is a moment of just legendary nerve. With the whole battle hanging by a thread, Tokugawa Ieyasu takes this unbelievable risk. He orders his riflemen to fire not at the enemy in front of him, but directly at Hideyoshi's troops on the mountain. It was a message, a threat, a final push. He was basically saying, make your choice, right now.
Ieyasu's gamble paid off big time. Jolted into action, Hideyoshi gave the order to charge, but he didn't charge the Eastern Army. He charged downhill straight into the flank of his own surprised allies in the Western Army. It was the ultimate betrayal, and it instantly shattered the Western lines. A chain reaction kicks off as other warlords who were on the fence see what's happening, and they switch sides too.
And what had been a tense stalemate just moments before, well, it turned into a complete and total rout. The Western Army just collapsed. Mitsunari fled, but he was captured and executed a few days later. And these casualty numbers, they tell the whole story. The betrayal turned what was a closely fought battle into a one-sided slaughter. And with this single decisive victory, Tokugawa Ieyasu had wiped out all his rivals. The prize wasn't just winning a battle, it was winning the entire nation of Japan. So what did that victory buy? Just look at this number, 250. That's 250 years of unprecedented peace. In 1603, Ieyasu was named shogun, the supreme military ruler, and he established a dynasty that would rule over a stable Japan for more than 2.5 centuries. That endless cycle of civil war, the Sengoku Jidai, was finally, definitively over. And this really brings us to our final thought. What if Tokugawa Hideyoshi hadn't hesitated? What if he'd charged just as he was ordered? You know, history rarely ever turns on such a clear, dramatic pivot point. The Battle of Sekigahara wasn't just the end of a war, it was the birth of early modern Japan, all decided by a single moment of betrayal on a misty October morning.